La 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 Vachkin 7 and some Irish coffee. I got some coffee, some Baileys because it is a little bit early in the morning. I'm trying to get this video out and made, and not have to wait till the nighttime because I want to go do stuff and other things. And usually what happens is I get a little bit too many beers and someone wants to fight, and then I'll be like, I'll always prioritize fighting with other people rather than making content because I actually like playing the game more than I like talking about it. But people like to listen to me talk about it, and I think that I can advertise this crap and get people to want to play it because I want more people to play Sim. It's more fun to watch people learn and watch people do stuff and things. But speaking of stuff and things, we are back in our prop tier. We're doing some prop gaming because I really enjoy prop gaming. I am first and foremost more interested in the World War II stuff, more interested in dogfighting than I am in like using missiles to run up the scoreboard and be like, oh, cool, I went 26-0 in a game against like the most oblivious F-16 mains that I have ever ran into. Like, yeah, I can do that, but at some point, all that stuff looks the same. And I don't really like advertising that part of the game because it really gets people into the mindset and really leans in the mindset that you need to go buy a $60 premium to grind to the end of a tech tree to get the part that's being advertised. And what gets lost in translation is like the game's fun at other places too. Like you can have other ways of having fun in Sim, and this is probably the best place to have like I would say kind of like legitimate fun because for all intents and purposes, I will say that yes, there are flaws in balancing and props, but they're not really as glaring as like top tier sim is. It's not completely the one sided. Oh, I didn't spawn in the U.S. plane. Y team is going to evaporate because nobody can afford to play it. Like no, props for the most part, every single prop in the game is somewhat viable. There are some that are better than others. There are some that are meta defining, but they're not meta defining, except for like a couple things. Like on 3.3 days or like whatever day that the Key 61 gets to be the very top of its bracket where the plane is faster than like the things that it fights and easier to use and a bunch of other things. Like yeah, cool. We can make the argument that the Key 61 is meta defining. But is it though? Coming back to this is comfort food for me. This is way more comfortable. This is way more interesting to me. The fights are, I would say, I don't want to say the word dynamic because like dynamic makes it sound like oh yeah the fights change. Like the fights are more like intimate. They're more like right there. It's more in your face, and there's more subtlety to it where you can kind of go into a fight with a Spitfire in something that doesn't turn as well, but because he can't really use the full ability of his plane because he makes a mistake because he wing stalls, you can kind of capitalize on that. So like there is more for me there's more wargaming the individual fight here than there is in top tier. And top tier is just it's so easy because everyone does the same thing of like they grind directly to top tier, get into sim, and it's the only thing they play and you're like, okay, cool. This guy just stalled himself out in the first turn. I don't have to like really have to do a lot here. Or, oh, we made a turn and 2.5 seconds later, 16 AMRAMs of God come in and destroy your life. So for me, I come back to props. I also come back to props because it's probably the best value you're going to find in the game. Because what happens with top tiers, yeah, cool. It takes a long time to get to top tier. Once you have one tech tree to top tier, trying to start another one to get to the next plane that you want, that's daunting. It's annoying. I don't like doing it. It's also like why I don't have a lot of tanks. Like I didn't like grinding in tanks, so I just don't do it. So I have had the game for 10 years, and my tanks basically stop at early Korean War. I'm like I'm not gonna grind top tier tanks. I just don't enjoy it enough to really want to do it. On the other hand, though, because of the way the game is structured for the grind, you can kind of unlock a lot of props fairly quickly. So if I am someone who started out, I'm like, okay, I want to play like the Yak 3 and the Russian tree, and I decide that I want to switch over to the American tree and I don't have anything unlocked. It's really kind of a much smaller time investment than trying to go from like F-16 CDS U-27. And there's a lot more variety in props too. There's a lot more stuff that is viable. Like in props, as long as you have pretty like good middle of the road performance, like a plane that's reasonably fast, turns reasonably well, is reasonably easy to fly, and has like good rear visibility, you can kind of make it work. And even the stuff that's like abysmally bad, like stuff like the bow fighter and the mosquito, some of your heavy fighters. Those planes are bad, but you can always back them up with like a good plane, like a Spitfire or like a Crew. So you can have multiple planes, and maybe like, oh yeah, cool, the mosquito's not working for you today, but you can kind of use those planes that are bad as kind of like a challenge, little bit of a challenge mode, and it's fun and cathartic to get like a gun kill on the mosquito, even though the plane is like legitimately terrible. The biggest issue that newer players are going to have with props is that the skill floor is a lot higher to start getting kills. Like I can take a dude, give him Mirage F1C, and say, "Here you go, shoot your magic twos at like the first two things you see." You will probably be productive, and you will probably get kills that way. I can't do the same thing in props. Props takes a little bit more effort to kind of cross that bare minimum threshold where you'll start getting kills, because you can do everything right. You can do everything as far as the setup right. Like you set up for a boom and zoom pass on P47, and a 109 is low. When you come in, you're like, you got speed, you got the energy, and you shoot, but you didn't use your rudder correctly, and you just miss all the shots. And now the guy's reacting, and now instead of having like a really easy kind of layup shot, you have to try to dogfight the guy, or you have to run away and like spend the next 5 minutes setting up for like another pass on an oblivious guy. It means that you can do everything right and still come out kind of like empty-handed. At the same time, once you start getting good at props, once you start hitting your shots, once you kind of like get those aha moments, there are more aha moments in props that can be had than there are in jets. There's also like a wider variety of playstyles amongst like players that are dedicated to doing this, that you'll learn stuff as you go along. Like fighting Greek Air Force is a lot different than fighting someone who's like very dedicated to doing just pure boom and zoom stuff. And once you start learning to recognize that, once you kind of like learn to meld your own play style together or do stuff that's different, that's kind of like the fun part. That's the fun part, is like learning and growing. And there's more learning and growth to be had doing this, because it's simple, but because it's simple, it's also more refined. The numbers matter. Yes, a lot of the same stuff does apply, where yeah, numbers for the teams will like eventually like fall apart, but just refining the execution, just refining everything, having something to consistently work on is fun. And also because you can switch your tech tree up and switch your planes up and not be committed to like, oh, I ground by one top tier and I don't want to grind like two more tech trees to get like the slightly different thing to be on the enemy team. You can kind of do that in props, because you can honestly unlock most of your props within more or less like a 1 week period. Like it's a lot faster. You get like a $5 premium plane. You get something you're comfortable with in a new tech tree. Like, okay, cool. I grind the Russian tree and I like the Yak 3. Well, okay, cool. I can spend a little bit of money. I get the French Yak 3. It's a plane I'm already good in, and I'm going to basically speed run what is like the first half of the French tree. And I could do the same thing with like a American 109 or a Japanese P51 or whatever, where I can get some of those planes and kind of like get that variety and kind of get that value out of it. Another issue with props is that finding the good matches, finding the matches that have like the active portion of the player base is not immediately intuitive. So if you're brand new at the game and you go load into an Afghanistan EC that's props 4v4, you're going to spend a lot of time flying around, not seeing anything, and chances are that lobby is mainly dudes doing like bomber tasks. Like you're not going to have like that much fun. On the other hand, if you go into a small map that's 16v16 like Tunisia, Sicily, that might be a little bit too much fun too quickly just starting out. So I like the small maps. I like more activity, quicker to do the thing. Like I think prop scales really well for Sicily. It scales well for Tunisia, and it scales well for like Port Moresby. Those are probably like my top 3 prop maps. There's a couple of like European maps that I think Smolensk is like a really, really big one that it doesn't seem like it should be big. Same thing with Bulge is pretty much okay. Winter Stalingrad is good. Like you want to have kind of like those medium-sized maps with like a lot of like lobby activity. Or if you have some of those smaller maps like the 4v4, 5v5 stuff, like it still works out more or less. And even with that, even with like your bigger lobbies, there are points on maps where people like just tend to congregate. Like yes, usually it's like towards the center, but like on I think Sicily has a lake in it that's usually like if I can't find people, I'm just gonna go to the lake and just I'm gonna fight people at the lake because that's That's where Thunderdome is. That's where people show up for Thunderdome. I don't know why it is, but that just happens to be it. And then the other thing about props is like if you're not finding people, if you're kind of bored doing things like doctrinally, like okay, cool, the P-47 is a boom and zoom plane, and I'm gonna boom and zoom. Like okay, cool, you kind of mastered that, you kind of got good at that. You don't have to play the planes correctly. There is enough room for error. There's enough errors that are being made that you can do goofy things like dogfight in the P-47 and sort of come out on top a lot of the times. Can you dogfight a zero? Not really, but you can dogfight a 109 pretty much competently, and you can do it for a couple of turns, and you can kind of troll people that way because people tend to stick to the things that they know. They tend to like have like a play style they'll develop at first. Like they'll be like, I want to boom and zoom, I want to turn and fight, and then it's like finding the areas where you can blur the lines. That's like a whole nother level of gameplay. That's a whole nother like layer of depth, and that's kind of like that's where I have fun in props. Is kind of doing everything, but kind of like mixing it up. Like if you look at my old video that I think I just posted, like there's a point where like I'm drunk and I just turn on smoke and like, hey, come fight me. Like you can do that in props. You're not going to go bankrupt doing it. And the aesthetics of like killing people, like watching someone's wing explode from like guns, is way the hell cooler than the ding from like a long range AMRAM, or the assurance of like I shot a 9M from the side aspect against a guy that didn't see me. It's a lot more fun, at least for me. The skill to do it, the work that is put in, the refinement, that's what I like. That's why I kind of like enjoy doing this. At the same time, like I'm not playing props to like boost my ego per se. Like yeah, cool, the whole game is an ego boost, the whole channel is an ego boost, but I'm not trying to play the game in such a way that I'm like trying to be unkillable. Like I got a P-38 here. This guy's newer probably, and he goes back to his base, and like he at least has a chance. Like I'm trying to play in a way that like I'm gonna outmaneuver the P-38. I like the Spitfire here. I come in, I've got more energy, and I feel safe fighting this guy because of like the experience that I have. And he face plants into the ground because it's a Spitfire, and the plane is not. Spitfire is good, but it's one of the harder planes to learn in sim. And it's going to be kind of like one of the other obstacles is like some planes in sim are harder to fly well than others. Like typically speaking, Japanese planes probably the easiest to get the maximum performance out of because a lot of them do not have like really noticeable prop torque. They have like really kind of linear, very, very flat across the board flight models. Like Ki-84, brain dead easy. As soon as you get combat flaps out, you can just pull the stick back and then you're good. It's a very, very good plane to learn on. Like if you're going to get a premium plane, you want to play prop tier, yes. Is it overpowered? The Ki-84 at 5.0? Yes. Is it probably the fastest way to actually start having like a good gameplay experience without like doing a lot of brain power? Also, yes. Same thing with like 109F4 is probably like a little bit harder than the Ki-84. There's more juice to squeeze out of the 109 because it does have some of like the quirks to it. But then you kind of like go up and you got like you really, really quirky, stupid, dumb flight models, which the F8F I think is one of those really dumb, quirky ones because as soon as the plane crosses over a speed range, the rudder doesn't really like to work. The plane likes to kind of like try to throw itself into the ground. It doesn't weather damage really well. Stuff like that. Things like the P-51, very good plane. Very, like, in some ways it's easy to fly because like you can just remain fast and boom and zoom things, but the acceleration curve on the stick itself of like how sensitive it is like towards the center means that really kind of like refining your aim with that plane and like being able to do it on demand is a lot more difficult than something like the LA-7 or the Ki-61 or any of these other planes that have like a much more predictable control curve, one that's a little bit easier for most people to learn. But that's part of the game, though, is like learning the control curve, learning how to control the plane. And because like there's enough variety in the way these planes control, it means that there's another layer of depth to it. And it means that doing something like learning how to dogfight well in, say, for instance, like the P-38, where you have like this big kind of goofy plane that is almost as good as a 109, where if you can leverage its advantages, you can do a lot of work in it. It feels really good to just come into like a furball and just fuck shit up. Same thing with like 190s. People look at 190s like, oh, plane can't turn, plane sucks, plane's terrible. Which, yes, it's not very good. It doesn't turn very well. You use the landing flaps on it, you kind of rotate around, and you kind of learn to like maximize the maneuverability like when you have to. when you get kills in that, when you get kills in something that's kind of like abysmal dog shit, it feels pretty fucking cool, which is why I play props. Props are cool. Everything else, jets are cool too. Like, you can be like, yeah, jets are cool. But the amount of effort required to do well in props, the learning curve to do it, the depth that you have, the variety, the fact that you're not hemorrhaging money, the fact that you can kind of experience a lot more of the game without sinking a shit ton of time to get to the thing that you've been advertised, that's what makes this fun. That's why I'm going to keep playing it. And this is what I mean right here. I am turn fighting a Spitfire in a Lavochkin. I am using the fact that I have more energy, I have a little bit more experience, I'm lower fuel, and he's still learning his plane. So I can leverage that against him. And in order for me to get the kill, though, I still have to execute the ability of aiming. So, like, I look over the nose, I shoot the guns, it explodes. Like, this is cool as fuck. I like this better than top tier jets. I find this more exciting, more fun, more consistent. It is legitimately probably the best part of the War Thunder Sim experience. And that's the video.